Hey, welcome to our week 2 of our deep dive, going through our series, Knowing Jesus. Just looking to give our body, our community, an opportunity to dive a little deeper in the passage and the story and where we're at in the life of Jesus. And so we've got Terry here again this week.
And we're moving so fast through. We're at age 12. We've got 12 years.
Yeah, well, even then, like with this whole study, you still have to choose what you're
right,
what you're looking
right.
at. So anyway, yeah, we're in week 2. We're looking at Jesus at age 12 when his family went to the temple to celebrate Passover, and then they forgot him. They assumed that he was with them when they went back home to Nazareth. They go back to the temple, or go back to Jerusalem.
Right.
They find him there. They're like, "Hey, we're distressed. How could you do this to us?" And he said, "You should have known that we were here." That I was going to be here, and he was there. He was asking questions. He was learning from the rabbis, and then So that's the story from a kind of a big shot. But I want to, Terry, what just before we dive in, what's sticking out to you from this series?
I think it's just looking at Jesus, focusing on him and who he is, and kind of moving beyond maybe some of the childhood sins or stories that we know or kind of learn, or even the safe or tame Jesus that we know. I think just looking a little bit at the countercultural Jesus, and I think this story was like, a nice little 12-year-old Jewish boy, but he's really challenging us. Like, I just think that I'm about my Father's business. We don't want that. We don't want a Jesus about a Father's business. We want a Jesus about my business. And so, I just think the intentionality of Jesus in all these stories really communicate who he is.
Yeah, challenging for his parents, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you do? What would you do if you were Mary or Joseph in this? Like how would you respond?
Well, it's kind of like it shut them up. Like, you get the sense it shut them up, but they were amazed. And I think that's, there's those two words, amazed and astonished or shocked. I think the NIV translates it shocked at kind of all this. And that idea of astonish is changing your mind. It's like that they're growing, they're understanding Jesus and what this all means for them. And I'm sure it's like anytime God's at work in our life, we don't fully understand what that's going to be until we're kind of in the process, or we think we know what God's up to, and then we realize it's a whole lot deeper than what we thought.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. There's a few words in this passage we're going to get to that, I don't know, when you think about Scripture, when you think about the words that the authors used, they were very intentional as to why. Because I see, amazed, astonished, like in awe, as kind of synonymous, and yet we're going to see as we kind of get into the passage, like there were specific kind of purposes.
There are little differences. Yeah, and that's the Holy Spirit. That's why that Scripture is so deep. Is what's the Holy Spirit choosing every word through the author to write
for
down.
sure. So Luke 2, verses 41 through 52. We're going to have it on the screen. Hopefully it translates well for those of you who are watching. But something that kind of stuck out to me a little bit, I wanted to hear from you is in the Gospel of Luke. Right, it starts in the temple, right, with the prophecy of John the Baptist's birth, and then you have kind of the end of this infancy narrative here, just this first part of Luke, and it's in the temple again. He kind of bookends.
Right, they go back to the temple,
with
8th
the
day.
temple.
Yeah.
Could you just get?
And then they're back at 12 in the temple. Actually, I think you can look at the whole life of Jesus. There's kind of these great temple moments, which the temple was the place where God's Spirit dwelt. Yeah. And it was the place, the Shekinah glory, the Ark of the Covenant, God was there. And then centuries before, the Spirit left, right? And, God wrote Ichabod, the Spirit has departed over the temple. And so it's not really until Jesus at 8 days old that God is back in the temple, right? He's there in the temple. And then, every year when they return to Nazareth, he's at the temple. And then we're going to see in a few weeks the first Passover as a kind of a rabbi teacher, and he throws out the money changers. And then he's back at the temple just before his crucifixion. And kind of that week he's in the temple again. And so the whole life of Jesus is kind of based around the temple, and that's the promise. I'm going to you can destroy this temple, but it will be raised in 3 days. And then, 70 AD, 40 years after Jesus, that temple, Solomon's temple, rebuilt, is destroyed.
Yeah, that is, especially coming out of our Ezra Nehemiah series where we talked about the temple. The temple
Right.
was rebuilt. Like that was such a feature, a prominent feature for Jewish people. That's where God's presence dwelt. Like
Right.
that's how they worshipped.
It's the focal point. It's where
yeah.
the sacrifices were made, where the priests went before God, and that's not needed anymore.
Yeah.
Right, because that Jesus came to fulfill all
Yeah.
that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to do a quick plug for the Old Testament because, if you don't have the Old Testament, you miss all of that.
You miss it all.
You miss the
Right.
significance and the richness of that. Well, cool. Let's just jump in. So in verse 41,
Yeah.
this is where where it starts. His family is going from Nazareth to Jerusalem. We did have a question that came up on Facebook. How far? Like how long of a journey How long would it have taken?
It's about 70 to 80 miles. So we're not quite sure exactly what route they took, how to get there, what was the actual route that they took. So it's presumed, if you've got family and people traveling 20, 25 miles a day, so somewhere 3 to 4 days probably to get there. And could be through some dangerous territory as well. And I think, as you're saying, they traveled in caravan with kids and women and the men. So, the Passover was 7 or 8 days, 3 or 4 days traveling. I mean, it's a 2-week event out of your life.
It's a commitment.
It's a big commitment.
And the fact that they did this every year. I think you said something this weekend of it. It showed kind of their commitment, right? Their piety.
Right.
They took this seriously. This opportunity to go and to observe the Passover in Jerusalem at the temple. It wasn't just, oh, hey, we're going to have Thanksgiving dinner at mom and dad. Like there was an event that was drawing them there.
Right, and it's 7 days. Passover is 7 days in Israel. It's 8 days outside of Israel, but it's 7 days of there's purification and cleansing and being ready. So it's a commitment. You think in that culture you would lose income if you're a carpenter and you're not working. You've got half a month where you're not getting income, and you're spending obviously some income to travel and go to different places. So it's a significant
commitment, and I just think that we're going to kind of talk a little bit more later, but Jesus's parents took their responsibility and their call very seriously, because they had the Son of God, the Messiah, and they were still working out for themselves what that even meant.
But I think it was who they were too. Obviously that's part of Mary. One of the reasons I'm assuming that the Father chose Mary, what he saw in her heart and in her. And that's what I think is fascinating, is the last time we see Joseph. And this is what he's doing, is intentionally kind of leading his family spiritually.
I did have a question. So Jesus, when he was really young, like his family, they fled. They went to Egypt. The Passover was this celebration of how God had spared his people, how he passed over. I don't know. Do you think there's any connection there? Like what would that have been like for them? Like, we came out of Egypt.
They called out of. Well, I'm sure. I mean, that's what the prophet said. Obviously, Matthew makes that connection when he writes the gospel. So I can't. I'm assuming other people thought that. I'm assuming Mary and Joseph must have thought that. That they're coming out. This is what our forefathers went through. That they probably would think, we've been through that area. We've been through the desert. We've walked through there. Yeah, and that. It is this picture of going to the promised land. That's what salvation is.
Yeah. Is there anything with Passover specifically that you wanted to hit on? I know you talked a lot this weekend in the service about that.
I think one of the things we didn't really talk about is the intentionality in the Passover, the intentionality of sweeping away all yeast, leaven, which is a picture of sin, and just strong intentionality of clearing your life of that kind of, which is going to come up again when we look at baptism and baptism of repentance this weekend, about just kind of that inner cleansing of our life and being intentional about about that. And just what did Jesus experience? Both Jesus being mentored, I think, by his dad and the father at the same time. And what did Jesus experience and think as he was going through and thinking, in another 18 or 21 years, this is going to be me. I'm the lamb. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
It's like you wonder just what's going through Jesus' mind.
Yeah, and that raises a great point, great question. I had a professor in college who was talking about this particular story, and he was under the persuasion that convinced that one of the things that drew Jesus to the temple and kept him there was that he almost had this like self-discovery of sorts of who he was during this event. I do wonder, how aware was Jesus, even at the age of 12, of like who he was and what he was, what he was going to have to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he knew something. He said, I have to be here.
Yeah.
I have to be about my father's house. Like, he knew his connection. He knew at that point who his father was and what that meant. And obviously his answers kind of elevated his understanding in the eyes of people around. But yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure there was ongoing, if he grew in wisdom and stature and favor, there's this ongoing unwrapping of that in his life.
No, that's good. I wanted to also ask, if we get into the next verse, when the feast, the previous one, he was 12 years old, right?
Yeah.
They did this every year.
Yeah.
Like what? I mean, Luke could have pulled. I mean, obviously something specific, unique happened on this particular occasion. But like, why? Like, is there any significance of him being 12?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's only what we can kind of understand or infer. I think there are several things. One is, for females, 12 was kind of bat mitzvahs when they become women at 12. For males, it's 13. So at 12, this is very intentional. This is the last year that Jesus is really under the influence of his parents in that way.
He's a child.
He's a child. Yeah. He will be considered a man, an adult. So, there's something, I mean, even at the end of the passage where he goes back and he lives in obedience to them, there's some wonderful things about that. But that it's also this last year that the father mentors them in a unique way. And there was, when they were 11 and 12, those last 2 years, there was supposed to be this very intentional mentoring of a dad to a son, particularly
at age 12.
At that age 12, which again, I think, okay, here's, this is the last we see of Joseph. And this is what we don't know very much about him, but we know that he did this. And it's just a challenge, I think, to all of us as parents, calling people, passing on the faith. How do we do that? And I know that raises lots of guilt and anxiety and frustration of people, but it's such a strong call, and we're called to do that. And if people go through and weren't Christians, weren't believers, didn't understand that, God gives you a second chance as grandparents, second chance to mentor some other kids, to volunteer. God's a God of grace and second chances. But there's something intentional about this picture of, at this intentional moment of discipleship, really the Father's doing that. And I think that's part, we, on this journey as a church, how do we partner with families to be able to do that?
Yeah, that's great. Chris, I was out at St. Charles this weekend, and Chris, I loved it. He kind of used it as this pastoral moment to encourage parents, to encourage families, like, hey, listen, this is, these were Jesus's parents, and they still forgot him in Jerusalem, right? And he turned out okay. Yeah, obviously there's something there, right. But that's our call as a church, to partner with families. Families, primary spiritual influencers, they have a unique role in the lives of kids, and the Son of God, that family is not exempt from that. And so Joseph was definitely active. Before we go kind of further, I do want to, what do you think the next however many years look like? So this is the end of his childhood, and we don't have anything from when he's, between now and when he shows back up at age 30 for public ministry. Yeah,
there's so much unknown, that people would love to unpack. Yeah. The other thing about this particular season in his life is that it was the normal time when young men would be in the process of becoming a disciple to a rabbi. This is about the right time, 12, 13. So having this interrogation, this dialogue with the rabbis was not that uncommon because boys would do this. And so it leaves, it leaves so much unanswered really we want to know about just even the growing awareness of the public of who Jesus was at what time. Did they see him, as he was maturing in the community? Did they see the spiritual authority in there? We just don't know. We know he seemed faithful. He was working as a carpenter, seemed to work as a carpenter for a while, but was called a rabbi. He was called a rabbi. People referred to him. They didn't say, "Oh, you should be a rabbi." They called him a very countercultural rabbi. So, it's those 18 years, and you can read. There's all sorts of lost books and crazy stories about what that is.
We know, though, that God was using that season to prepare him for his ministry.
Right.
He was, even at the end of this passage, we see he grew in wisdom and stature, right? There was this growing, both physically, but also, just his relationship with other people. It was a preparation season for him.
And I think it's so important for our culture today because we live in the social media culture where we want to be known, we want to be successful, we want to put everything out there. We don't want to be hidden. And particularly, I look at this passage and I think how many parents would go, hey, we need to move to Jerusalem and we need to start giving Jesus some more rabbi lesson or, get him with the who's who. So, because being a rabbi was the ultimate. That was, they were part of high society. So you wanted your kids to do that. And there's this intentional hiddenness that Jesus lives with for almost 30 years, which is so hard in our culture of celebrity and being known in some way. And I think sometimes it's hard because we feel hidden. It's sometimes like, does nobody know? Does nobody know me? Does nobody see what I can do? Why do I seem hidden? And God hides us and keeps us there on purpose, and it's okay. Right? We don't have to put ourselves, God knows what we need
Jesus, Son of God, Messiah, anointed, all of these things, and yet we have nothing from him for 18 years. And the idea is that he was learning, he was asking questions, he was learning how he was a carpenter, he was taking care of his mom, presumably, because his dad at some point isn't in the picture anymore, he passes away, and yet he was faithful and obedient in that.
Right.
And that was enough.
And I think that's and we didn't really get that to the end of the message. That he obeyed them. He went and he obeyed, and he gives honor to submission. And again, our culture, it's I want to rule, I want to be in control, I want to dominate, I want to tell people what to do. That there's the honor comes in telling people what to do, but Jesus gives honor to submission and obedience. And he did that. It's the end of 12. He did that, which kind of, he kind of says, hey, this is who I am. I'm about my Father's business, but part of my Father's business is honoring you. Part of my Father's business is obeying.
That's so good, right? Like Philippians 2 describes, the humility of Jesus and his obedience. And when I think of obedience for Jesus, I think, he was obedient even to the point of going to the cross, which is true. But he was also obedient to the point of he listened to his parents.
Mom and dad.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We want I want the big sacrificial. I want to, do something significant. But it's in the everyday, in the normal life. And that's what Jesus lived a normal life. He prepared. And, I often say Elijah had one really, really good day in his life. Probably 2 or 3. Jesus had 3 really good years, but the rest, we don't know. And God says, you don't have to know. It's not for you to know. And there's going to be lots in our life that isn't known, and that's okay. Okay. I'm sure in heaven we'll find out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really good. Cool. Well, let's keep going in. So basically, the feast ended. Oh, I wanted to make one observation. The end of 42, they went up according to custom. We think up. It means we go north, right? And for them, like direction, especially as it related to the temple and Jerusalem, like anytime you were going to Jerusalem from any direction, you were going up to Jerusalem, right, in elevation. But also there's this idea of God's presence, and you're going to worship.
And I've had the privilege of being in Jerusalem twice in my life, and it is on a hill, and we were not walking, but you are driving up, and you're going, and there's something just so unique about that whole city. But the Jewish people had the Song of Ascent. There were particular psalms in the book of Psalms that they would sing as they're getting ready, like in anticipation of going to the temple and of meeting with God and being kind of in his presence. And so, you get the picture of this assembly of families who are there, and I'm sure that they sang some of the songs and repeated them as they were walking up and ascending, going up to the place where they were going to meet with God and find that kind of forgiveness.
That's so good. So anyway, in verse 43, the feast ended. They were returning. Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it. I can't even imagine what they were thinking when they discovered a day later that Jesus wasn't.
And I'm sure, you probably haven't yet, but I mean, there's moments I think in almost every parent's life where you can't find your child. And I remember one time we were in a big mall in a store, and our daughter was probably 8 or something, and it's like, I can't find her in the store. And there's probably about 3 or 4 minutes looking through the store, and you're panicked, right? And so I can't imagine 3 days.
So it was a day of travel.
Right.
Then they realize, hey, Jesus is missing. So the next day they return. So it's a day of just frantically trying to get back to Jerusalem. And then it's a day of looking for him.
Right.
Before they find him in the temple. So 3.
On the third day.
On the third day.
Again, the gospel is kind of everywhere. The third day.
There.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sheer panic in us, we lost God. We had one thing.
One job.
One job.
You had one job.
And it blew. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I can imagine when they see it, that's what when they start to scold him, I can see, you know what you've done, which is basically always how we feel. We always feel like the victim.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So they find him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them, asking questions. I'm sure asking questions about the scriptures, talking about the word. I think this is an interesting moment because Jesus is described as the Word. He's the fulfillment of the Old Testament, and yet here he is, the Word, asking these people. The teachers,
they're asking him about the Word.
Yes, it's just this fascinating scene.
Yeah.
I don't know, every once in a while my mind goes to Sunday school, when you have the kids who they're the pastor's kids and they grow up, they know the answers, and they're telling the Sunday school teacher what's up, but here is Jesus, right? Asking them questions, I'm sure, and telling them his interpretation, and everyone's just astonished, right?
Amazed.
They're amazed. Yes,
amazed.
They're amazed. So can you speak to that word? Amazed.
That word, Luke uses it a couple times again, and it has this idea of just the fingerprints of God. Why is something amazing? Because there's just something, you see the fingerprints of God, which when you look at the heavens at night and see the star, okay, that had to have been made. Who created that to be there? You see kind of the fingerprints of God, and I think that's what that they knew. This was more than just, I think, an earthly wisdom. There's something divine that was there.
Yeah. That is so good, and this is the specifics of the Greek words and the uses, the intentions, and even what Luke is trying to do here is he is trying to give a historical account, right? He says that in the very beginning of his gospel, and part of that is capturing specifically what was going on and what the people, right, all who heard it. So there's the assumption here is it's teachers, but it's not just teachers. It's people who are going to the temple to worship. It's anyone they're seeing this little boy, this 12-year-old, and they're amazed they're amazed
Right.
over him. They
Right.
see
There's
God.
something God. They see something. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, then in verse 48, when his parents saw him, they were astonished. So what's that? You have amazed, and then you have astonished, and there's a
Yeah, and I
contrast.
think the astonish is you've changed your mind about something. You see something in such a way that it's like, okay, I have to think differently. So I think that's what what I'm assuming here is they're even seeing their son differently, and I'm projecting perhaps, but I can't help but wonder, did they think, okay, he's going to be the Son of God. He's going to do great things. He's just our kid now, but he's going to, and it's like, oh no, he is the Son of God.
Yeah.
This is, he is his Father's son.
Yeah, it's like they
this
were
moment.
given like glasses to like actually
Yeah.
see him for who he
Yeah.
was. Like they had this assumption, this understanding, even a pretty good one, right? Like God had sent angels to both
Yeah.
Joseph
Right.
and Mary to say, hey, who this person is, but they're still learning. They're still coming to a greater understanding. And I even wonder what that trip back was like. You think Joseph and Mary are probably going back and forth about, okay, when we see him, you're going to say this. Okay, no, don't say
Yeah.
that. We need to be, and then kind of the what you're left with whenever they actually find him is this, any plan that they had kind of went out the window because they see what's happening and they come to maybe a greater realization or understanding even in that moment that, oh no, we were wrong. This is incredible.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so his mother, so Mary says to him, son, why have you treated us so?
And you're like, you're the parent. Did you not make sure he went? Like it just is like it's kind of like, how did that journey begin?
Yeah.
Right? Was Jesus there gathering, saying, and were they all like, okay, we're here, we're gonna move on, and then he just slipped away?
Yeah, is this like a Home Alone kind of type situation where like you're all in their effort to leave, they're getting the plane tickets and they're just trying to get everybody in the car. Like what's going, and then he just is in the background, nobody's watching.
And I'm assuming too, in that there's probably relatives, there's friends.
Yeah.
It's the community raising the kids, right?
Yeah.
It takes a village, so they might just, he's with so and so, or
and maybe Jesus even told them. Like we don't know.
Yeah,
that.
maybe, and they just blanked
missed
I
it
don't know.
or lost it.
Yeah.
So his parents saw him. They were astonished. His mom says, son, why have you treated us so? Your father and I, we have been searching for you in great distress.
I can imagine. Like I said, I've experienced a few panicked minutes, but I can't imagine days.
Yeah, and Jesus' response here is just fascinating. Why were you looking for me?
Yeah.
Like, well, because we're your parents, and that's what we do. But that's not really the question he's asking, right? He's not really asking, why were you looking for me? He understands that the responsibility of the parent is to keep track of their kids.
Right.
He's asking because it's like it should have been obvious.
And that's what again, the first 12 years, we don't know what his education was. What was he thinking of being a rabbi? Like, was he I'm assuming, in school, so to speak, in training to do that? So it's like, okay, didn't you know, Mom, I'm here with these rabbi. If I'm going to take the next logical step in my education, this is what I need to do. This is why would I not be here? I don't have another chance to do this. Because it was pretty spectacular. You'd have the who's who of kind of all the teachers there in Jerusalem for the Passover. So it was a pretty big deal. When they're all sitting there, I mean, I'm sure this is a big conference.
Especially at Passover, right? That's when they all show up. Yeah, I'm struck by the language of this verb here. I must be in my father's house, right there. So we read this and there's this sense of like he is disobeying his earthly parents, and which isn't true. That's just kind of what I think our conclusion goes to on our first take. But he was being obedient to his heavenly Father, and like this. I don't know. Can you speak to that? Like
that word
must be.
DEI. I must be. It is. It's used throughout. I must go a little bit later and share the gospel. I must go to the cross. I must go to Jerusalem. It must be that all these things be fulfilled. It's used several different times. That this is what God is and what He has, that we have to just be obedient to. It's just what's gonna. This is. You must have known when the angel said that when you've been raising me. This is what I've been called for.
And Luke uses this this word a lot, and he uses it very intentionally. To speak of kind of Jesus's understanding, his purpose, his intention. Like, I have no other. There's nothing
Right.
else that I could be doing.
Yeah.
Right. I have to be here. I have to be doing this. Yeah. No. That is such just a good distinction. And then he also refers to. He says, "In my Father's house." So like, there is an understanding that Jesus has of his identity
Right.
in this moment, right? He is aware, because like I think you spoke of this weekend too. The Jewish people, they did not use
that
language to refer to God,
Right.
right? They had other titles. They had other
Yahweh,
names.
Jehovah, it's the unspeakable name. They wouldn't even write it. You know,
Yeah.
they wouldn't spell it because it was such a great. You couldn't say that. So, yeah, for him to speak so personally, and then we're getting a little ahead, but this here Jesus says, "This is my Father's, and my Father's house." So the very next time we see Jesus, fast forward, 18 years, and he's being baptized.
Yeah.
And then the Father says, "This is my son. I need to be in my Father's house. This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." Like, you see it's like, okay, Jesus understood, and the Father confirms it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so good. And then in verse 50, and they didn't understand, right, what he just said to
Yeah,
them, because
yeah.
they had no paradigm, no understanding
Right.
for that
Right.
for that level.
Yeah.
Cool. And then just to finish up this passage, verse 51, and then he goes down with them. So again, the down, like from Jerusalem, from the temple back to Nazareth. And it says he was submissive to them.
Yeah.
We don't like that word, submissive.
No, I mean, that's what I say. I mean, I think here we see Jesus, fully God, fully man, and so we see the two of them. It bore out in Jesus. Even here, it's like, okay, there's something. He's about his Father's business. He is God. He is the Son of God, but he was their son.
Yeah.
And he, again, he dignifies submission and surrender. And he's, it is kind of, he's like, okay, I'm there, but I'm going to honor my parents, and I'm going to do that. And that's the best way I can do my Father's business is by being submissive.
Yeah, and I think this is, I mean, what an incarnational moment, right? We think of our incarnation, we think of Christmas, we think of God coming to earth as this baby, and that's true, but the incarnation shows up in so many other areas. And Jesus, as a pre-teenager, is submissive to his parents. Like, in that act, he is embodying humanity.
Right. And again, I think one of the things we see through the gospel is just that Jesus lived out the 10 Commandments, and here's the fourth one, honor your father and mother, and he did that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, okay, he's living out the commandments that God has given, and the laws that are there.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I want to go on just a little tangent here too, because you think of that commandment, right, to honor your father and your mother, and that speaks even to like the larger just natural authority structures that we have in our place. We don't get to choose our parents, yet it is, I am called to honor and to be obedient, right? I don't get to choose who, well, I guess in our country I have a voice, but we don't get to choose who's in authority.
Yeah. Ultimately,
over
we
us.
say God
But
puts
God
them in place.
puts them in. And so, like, I will respect and honor those who are in authority as a way of honoring and respecting God, unless they are, causing me or leading me to do something that would go against God, right? And so even in this story, we see that structure in place where Jesus was obedient to his parents. He didn't sin, right? He was perfect. And yet, when God called him to something else or to something greater, he that is who he listened to, right? He was obedient to. Cool. And then in 52, Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and with man. I hear this verse all of the time because my son loves listening to old Steve Green songs.
Oh,
and there's a song of Jesus grew, right? And again, here's his humanity. He is fully human. He is developing. He is growing. And I think, too, the incarnational kind of lens of this is we want to influence other people. We want to be prepared for what God has us called to, and yet we still have to grow in relationship with others and with God. And that.
Yeah, that's what you wish you knew what that was like. What did that ongoing kind of development of the relationship.
Yeah.
What was that?
That's
I don't
great.
know.
Well, is there anything
Okay.
else that you wanted to add that we didn't get to?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I just think, again, why of all the stories is this here? And I just, I think we are all Mary and Joseph. How could you do this? There's points in our life where we go, how could you do this? And Jesus, from the get-go, wants us to know he's about his Father's business in our life. And the best thing we could ever want is the Father's business, not us. Even as hard as that is at times.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
what
May
we
we also be about our Father's business.
are. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good. Awesome. You want to kind of tease us a little bit for what's coming up this
Oh,
weekend?
well, yeah, it's like finally, okay, Jesus makes his first public appearance, and first impressions are kind of significant sometimes. You
deal.
can tell a lot.
Yeah, they're
So
a big
this
deal.
is his first public impression, and it's not at all what people would think.
Yeah.
And but the Father says to him something that we all long to hear, and that the Jesus in us allows us to hear what the Father says to Jesus.
So good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
There you go.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for checking in. We have 8 months still to
Yeah,
go, so we
yeah.
got a lot to cover. We have resources on our website, calvary.church/knowingjesus. Also YouTube and social media as well. So Terry, thanks for
Thank
this
you.
week, and we'll catch you again next
See you
week.
there. Okay.